AITA for exposing my wife after she toasted her ex and sent him $18,000. I'm Fergal, 39, and I had been married to Marissa for 8 years, long enough to know how she took her coffee, how she folded laundry during bad TV, and exactly when her smile stopped reaching me. I'm a husband, a pretty ordinary man with a pretty ordinary life in the US, and for a long time. I thought ordinary was a good thing. Bills paid, groceries bought, Sunday calls with family, half-finished home projects, arguments about dishes that cooled down by morning. I didn't marry a villain. I married someone who used to make silence feel comfortable. Marissa was warm in a sharp way. Funny, quick, the kind of woman who could turn a slow grocery trip into a private comedy show. She remembered small things about people, not because she was trying to impress them, but because she noticed. When we were good, she made regular life feel less heavy. But somewhere around our 8th year, something changed. Nothing dramatic at first. No slammed doors. No screaming. Just a thin layer of distance settling over everything. She still said, "Love you," when she left the house, but it sounded like a receipt being handed over. She still sat next to me on the couch, but she angled her phone away. She still smiled, but the smile stopped arriving in her eyes. I told myself it was a rough patch. Married people have those. Stress stacks up. Routine gets stale. Nobody stays bright forever. Then Nolan messaged her. I knew the name. Nolan was Marissa's ex from before me. Not the ex she laughed about. Not the one she called a mistake. He was different. He was the one she described with careful words. Complicated. Intense. Someone who knew her back then. Someone who, according to Marissa, understood a version of her that I hadn't been around to see. The first time she mentioned him again, we were in the kitchen. I was rinsing a pan, and she was leaning against the counter with her phone in both hands, smiling at the screen like she forgot I could see her face. Who's that? I asked. Her smile vanished too fast. Nolan, she said. He just checked in. His dad had some health stuff last year, and he was going through old contacts. It's nothing. I hadn't said it was anything. Okay, I said. Is he all right? She shrugged. I guess. He said he just wanted closure on some things. We're adults, Fergal. That was the first time I noticed the way she defended something before I challenged it. I let it go because I didn't want to be that husband. The jealous husband. The insecure husband. The guy who hears an ex's name and starts marking territory like a dog. But closure became catching up. Catching up became friendship. Friendship became late-night messages that made her laugh under her breath when the house was dark. It became her flipping her phone face down when I entered the room. It became private jokes that stopped mid-sentence if I asked, "What's funny?" One night, I found her sitting on the laundry room floor beside a basket of towels, phone tucked between her knees, whisper laughing. It's almost midnight, I said. She looked up like I had kicked in a door. Can I not talk to a friend? You can talk to whoever you want, I said. I'm asking why you look scared every time I notice. She stood up and grabbed the basket. This is what I mean. You make everything an interrogation. I asked one question. You ask it with your face. That became her line. My face. My tone. My energy. My silence. Any reaction I had was wrong before it left me. I tried to talk about boundaries, not orders. I said I wasn't comfortable with secret late-night calls with an ex. I said I wouldn't be comfortable doing that to her, either. I told her I didn't want to police her friendships, but I also didn't want to pretend secrecy felt like trust. She sat across from me at the small kitchen table, arms folded, eyes tired in a way that made me feel guilty before she even spoke. He just gets parts of my past you weren't there for, she said. I don't need to own your past. Then stop acting threatened by it. I'm not threatened by your past, Marissa. I'm worried your past is getting a vote in our marriage. She looked away. After that, Nolan started showing up in arguments without being in the room. If I forgot to ask about something she cared about, she said, Nolan would have remembered that. If I tried to fix a problem instead of just listening, she said, Nolan would understand what I meant. If I was quiet because I was trying not to snap, she called it emotional punishment. The first time she said, Nolan remembers who I was before I had to explain myself all the time. I just stared at her. Why is Nolan part of this conversation? I asked. She wiped her eyes even though I hadn't raised my voice. Because he makes me feel seen. When your ex becomes the standard for your husband, that's not closure anymore. She laughed once, cold and tired. You're acting like a cop, Fergal. I should have understood then that she wasn't just talking to Nolan. She was building a story. I found out how public that story had become because of Elaine, Marissa's mother. Elaine called me on a Tuesday evening while I was putting leftovers into containers. I answered because we had always been civil. Not close, exactly, but respectful. She had the tone of a woman who had already heard a whole trial and was now calling the defendant. "Fergal," she said, "I need to ask you something as Marissa's mother." My stomach tightened. "Okay. Why does my daughter feel like she has to hide her emotions from you?" I set the container down. "What?" "She says she can't talk to you without being judged. She says you monitor her phone and make comments about money." "I don't monitor her phone. She's hurting. I know she's hurting. That's why I've been trying to talk to her." Elaine sighed like I had disappointed her with every syllable. "Maybe if you treated my daughter like a wife, she wouldn't need emotional support from someone else." I remember looking at the open fridge, at the little jar of pickles Marissa liked, at the casserole she'd barely touched the night before, and feeling something in me go very still. "Did she tell you the emotional support is coming from Nolan?" I asked. Elaine paused. "She told me you were making that into something ugly." "No. I'm asking if she told you. Marriage is not about keeping score, Fergal." That was the first time I realized Marissa had taken our private conversations and edited them before handing them to her family. I still didn't react the way I wanted to. I didn't call her a liar. I didn't drive over to Nolan's place. I didn't make threats. I did what I had been doing for months. I swallowed the sharpest part of my anger and tried to be fair. That weekend, we went to a family barbecue. It was the usual kind of thing at Elaine's house, with folding chairs in the yard, paper plates bending under too much food, and relatives talking over each other near the grill. Marissa was in a good mood that day, bright in a way she hadn't been with me in weeks. I watched her laugh with her cousins while her phone buzzed in her back pocket every few minutes. At one point, she read a text and burst out laughing. Elaine asked, "What's so funny?" Marissa smiled down at her phone. "Nolan. He just sent me this stupid thing from when we were younger." Then she looked around the table and said, "He always knew when I needed to be reminded I was still fun." The yard got quiet in that special way people get quiet when they pretend they didn't hear something. A cousin gave an awkward little laugh. Uncle Grant looked down at his plate. Elaine smiled like it was sweet. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I didn't embarrass her back. I didn't say, "Your ex shouldn't be texting you during a family barbecue." I didn't ask why being married to me apparently meant she needed to be reminded she was fun. I stood up and said I was going to grab more ice. Inside, I found my younger sister, Siobhan, standing by the sink with her arms crossed. She had come with me because she was one of the few people in my life who could see me being quiet and know it wasn't peace. "She's not venting, Fergal," Siobhan said softly. I glanced toward the back door. "What?" "She's campaigning." I looked at her. Siobhan pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot someone had sent her from a family group chat I wasn't in. Marissa had written, "I can't even talk about money without him hovering. I feel like every choice I make gets judged." Elaine had replied, "Honey, that is not normal. A husband should trust his wife." Another relative had written, "Fergal has always seemed quiet, but this sounds controlling." I read it twice. My hands felt numb. "She's making them ready to hate you," Siobhan said. "You're so afraid of looking controlling that you're letting her control the whole story." I handed her phone back. "I'm trying not to make it worse. Sometimes doing nothing is how it gets worse." That sentence stayed with me. A few days later, I booked a marriage counseling appointment. I found someone with evening availability, sent Marissa the confirmation, and asked her to look at the intake forms when she had time. She stared at the email like I had served her court papers. "So now I need therapy because I have feelings?" she said. "No. We need help talking without tearing each other apart." "You mean you need someone to tell me Nolan is bad?" I didn't say his name. "You didn't have to." She canceled the first appointment the morning of, saying she was too drained. I understood. I rescheduled. She canceled the second one while I was in the shower. I came out to a text from the counselor's office saying the appointment had been canceled at Marissa's request. When I asked her about it, she said, "I'm not sitting in a room so you can make me look crazy." Then she told Elaine I was trying to force her into therapy so a stranger would take my side. That was when I stopped thinking this was just about Nolan. The money started getting strange around the same time. Not huge amounts at first. There was a dinner charge at a place Marissa said she'd never been. Gas station purchases across town when she told me she was at her friend's house. A joint credit card statement with 2 entrees, 2 drinks, and 1 dessert on a night she said she was out with the girls. When I asked, she didn't answer the question. She attacked the fact that I had noticed. So now I need permission to spend money, she said. No. I'm asking why a dinner for 2 is on our joint card when you told me you were with 3 friends. She threw a dish towel onto the counter. This is why I can't talk to you. That isn't an answer. It's the only answer you deserve when you treat me like a suspect. I hated how easily she made me doubt myself. That was the worst part. I would enter a conversation with a basic fact and leave wondering if asking about it made me cruel. Then the bank sent a fraud alert connected to a hotel deposit. I was at home when it came through. A small vibration. A routine alert. A charge flag because it didn't match our usual spending pattern. I called Marissa. She answered on the 4th ring. What? There's a hotel charge on the joint card. A pause. Oh, that was for a girls' night that got canceled. You booked a hotel for a girls' night? We were going to do a spa thing. Why are you making this weird? I'm asking because the bank flagged it. You love when that happens, don't you? Gives you an excuse. I looked at the alert and felt something colder than anger. That night, I didn't confront her again. I didn't have proof beyond a charge and an explanation I didn't believe. But the next morning, the shared laptop gave me what she forgot to hide. We had one old laptop we both used for printing, forms, and Random House things. I opened it to print a receipt for something unrelated, and her email was still open. I wasn't digging through folders. The inbox was right there, and an email preview sat at the top. Forwarded reservation details. I clicked because my name was on the card used to hold the room. The forwarded message included the hotel confirmation and a short note from Nolan. Still good for Friday? I can pay you back when things settle. My ears rang. I took a photo of the screen. I saved the email header. Then I closed the laptop and stood in the kitchen with both hands on the counter until my breathing slowed down. For the first time, I stopped asking what she would admit and started asking what I could prove. That sounds cold. Maybe it was. But when someone has trained everyone around you to see your questions as abuse, proof becomes oxygen. Over the next 2 weeks, I paid attention. I checked statements I had every right to see because they were joint. I saved counseling confirmations and cancellations. I took screenshots of bank alerts. I didn't hack her accounts. I didn't follow her. I didn't record private conversations. I just stopped deleting the little pieces of reality she kept asking me to ignore. The doorbell camera gave me another piece. A restaurant receipt showed a charge from a place I knew Marissa liked. She had told me she spent that afternoon alone, curled up and reading because she needed space. Something about the timing bothered me, so I opened the doorbell app to check when a package had arrived. There was Nolan, standing on my front step at 2:14 p.m. Marissa opened the door in leggings and one of my old sweatshirts. He hugged her. Not a long, movie scene hug. Not proof of a physical affair. But familiar. Easy. The kind of hug that doesn't happen between 2 people who are barely talking. He went inside. He left 43 minutes later. The footage didn't answer every question. It answered the one that mattered. She had been lying to my face. I sat in the living room after watching it, the house quiet around me, and felt the marriage shift from wounded to dangerous. Not because Nolan had come over. Because Marissa had made me feel insane for noticing cracks she was actively widening. The biggest piece came from a mistake, or maybe from arrogance. Marissa used our shared laptop again and left a messaging window minimized. I didn't read months of conversations. I didn't need to. The thread opened right where she had left it, with Nolan's name at the top and money all over the screen. Nolan had written, "If I can get the debt cleared, I can actually breathe. We could both get a fresh start." Marissa replied, "I'm working on it." He wrote, "You sure he won't notice?" Then her message sat there like a brick dropped through glass. "If he finds out, I'll tell them he's been controlling me for months. My mom will back me." I read it once, then again, then a third time, because my brain refused to accept that the woman I had shared a bed with had typed those words. That was not confusion. That was not loneliness. That was not needing to feel seen. That was a plan. Below it was a Zelle draft. $18,000. Nolan's payment account. The note field said, "Fresh start." I took photos. I exported what I could. I printed what mattered. And then I did the part Marissa never expected from me. I stayed quiet. Not passive. Quiet. I contacted the bank and asked what steps I could take to prevent unusual transfers from the joint account, especially large electronic payments. I moved my direct deposit into a separate account. I left enough for shared bills and documented every change. I scheduled a consultation with a family lawyer, not because I wanted to burn the marriage down, but because I needed to know how to protect myself if Marissa already had matches in her hand. The lawyer was calm. That helped. Document everything, she said. Do not threaten. Do not empty accounts. Do not hide assets. Protect your income going forward and preserve records. So I did. I bought a plain folder from a drugstore. On the front, I wrote, "Before everyone votes on my marriage." Inside, I put the timeline, counseling appointment emails, cancellation confirmations, statements showing charges, the hotel booking, still images from the doorbell footage, screenshots of Marissa's family group chat comments that Siobhan had sent me, the Zelle draft, the message where she said she would accuse me of financial control and her mom would back her. I wasn't planning revenge. I was done being the only person in the room without evidence. Then Elaine called. She said she wanted to host Sunday dinner so we could all talk it out. Her exact words were, "A husband fights for his wife, Fergal. He doesn't punish her for needing support." I asked, "Who is all?" "Just family." That meant Elaine, Uncle Grant, a couple of cousins, Marissa's sister, and whoever else had apparently earned voting rights in my marriage. I almost said no. Every sane part of me wanted to say no. But then I remembered Siobhan's words. She's campaigning. So I said, fine. Before we left for dinner, Marissa stood in the bedroom putting on earrings, careful and pretty in the mirror. I watched her from the doorway. She looked calm. Not guilty. Calm. "Your mom says tonight is to talk," I said. "She's worried about me. Do you want a private conversation before we walk into that?" Marissa met my eyes in the mirror. "I've tried talking to you. Maybe you need to hear it from people who love me." I nodded once. The folder was already in my car. Elaine's house smelled like roasted chicken and candle wax. There were paper napkins stacked on the kitchen island, 2 mini serving spoons, and relatives pretending this was a normal family dinner while watching me like I had arrived wearing handcuffs. Uncle Grant gave me a tired look and said, "Just listen to her tonight, all right? Nobody wants a fight." "I've been listening," I said. He patted my shoulder like that was the problem. Dinner started stiff. People passed bowls and made small talk that kept dying in the middle. Marissa sat across from me beside Elaine. Her phone was face down by her plate. Elaine waited until everyone had food before she cleared her throat. "Marriage is hard," she said, "but it gets harder when one person feels controlled instead of loved." My fork stopped moving. Marissa looked down at her lap. Elaine continued, "Maybe if you treated my daughter like a wife, she wouldn't need emotional support from someone else." A cousin murmured, "Exactly." Uncle Grant shifted in his chair, but didn't interrupt. I looked at Marissa. "Are you really doing this in front of everyone?" She lifted her chin. "Maybe you need to hear it in front of everyone." There it was. Not embarrassment. Permission. Marissa picked up her glass, not for a real toast, but with the same performance energy she got when she wanted the room to hold its breath. "I spent years trying to be okay with being managed," she said. "And then someone who actually knows me reminded me what it feels like to be chosen. Nolan listens. He remembers who I am. At least with him, I don't feel like one of your problems." The table went dead quiet. My face burned. My hand stayed still. Then my phone buzzed. I looked down. Bank alert. Transfer blocked. $18,000 attempted from joint checking. Destination, payment account associated with Nolan. For a second, nobody moved except me. I read it again, slowly, because timing like that almost felt scripted. Marissa's eyes flicked to my phone. A tiny change moved across her face. Not confusion. Recognition. I smiled. Not because anything was funny. Because the last little doubt in me had finally died. "That's funny timing, Marissa," I said. "What?" Elaine asked. Marissa's voice sharpened. "Fergal." I reached down, lifted the folder from my lap, and placed it on the table between the chicken and the green beans. "You wanted witnesses," I said. "Good. Don't," Marissa whispered. I looked at her. "You made them the jury. I only made sure they saw the facts." Elaine's chair scraped. "What is this?" The part she forgot to mention. I opened the folder. I didn't yell. I didn't call her names. I didn't insult Nolan. I started with the timeline because timelines are harder to cry over than accusations. "This is the first counseling appointment I booked," I said, sliding the confirmation onto the table. "This is the cancellation. This is the second appointment. Also canceled." Marissa told you I was forcing her into therapy to make her look crazy. What I actually wrote to her was, I don't want us to keep hurting each other without help. Nobody spoke. I placed the family group chat screenshot beside it. This is where she told you I hovered over money. That same week, this charge showed up on our joint card. I laid down the restaurant receipt. 2 entrees, 2 drinks, 1 dessert. She told me she was with friends. The next page is the hotel booking she called a girls' night. Marissa's face had gone pale. Stop, she said. No, I said. You don't get to call it privacy after you turned it into a family discussion. Elaine snapped. You are humiliating her. I looked at Elaine. You invited me here to be corrected in front of everyone. That is not the same thing. You're right, I said. I brought receipts. Uncle Grant leaned forward. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the papers. I placed the doorbell stills on the table next. This is Nolan at our house while I was away. Marissa told me she was alone that afternoon. I'm not saying what happened inside. I'm saying she lied. Marissa started crying then, but it didn't sound like grief. It sounded like panic. I never cheated, she said. I just needed someone who actually saw me. I'm not asking everyone to decide what you did physically, I said. I'm asking everyone to stop pretending this is just about my insecurity. Then I placed the Zelle draft and the screenshot of her message to Nolan in the center of the table. Elaine reached for it first. I watched her read the amount. $18,000. I watched her lips tighten at the note. Fresh start. Then she read the message. If he finds out, I'll tell them he's been controlling me for months. My mom will back me. Elaine's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Uncle Grant took the paper from her gently. He read it once, then looked at Marissa with an expression I had never seen from him before. Hold on, he said. Did you really tell Nolan we would help you make Fergal look controlling? Marissa wiped her face. That's not what I meant. Grant tapped the page. It's exactly what you wrote. I was scared. Of what? I asked. She looked at me, then at her mother. Of him twisting things. I almost laughed, but it would have come out wrong. You planned to send our joint money to your ex, I said. You planned the accusation before I even caught it. That is not fear. That is strategy. Elaine finally found her voice, but it was smaller now. Marissa, she said, what is this money? Marissa stared at her plate. Nolan has been having a hard time, she said. The room changed after that. Not all at once. Not like a movie. Nobody stood up and gave me a round of applause. Nobody suddenly became brave. They just went quiet. That quiet was enough. It was the sound of people realizing they had been used and not knowing how to climb out of it without admitting they had helped. One cousin who had called me controlling wouldn't look at me. Marissa's sister covered her mouth and stared at the table. Elaine kept reading the same page like the words might become different if she stared long enough. Then my phone buzzed again. A text from the bank confirmed the transfer was blocked and said further verification would be required before any similar transfer could go through. I turned the screen face up and slid it across the table. That came in while Marissa was explaining how Nolan makes her feel chosen, I said. Marissa stood up so fast her chair bumped the wall. You made me look horrible, she said. I looked at the papers spread across the table, then back at her. You did that yourself. You keep asking me to apologize for the mirror. Elaine stood too. Fergal, enough. No, Uncle Grant said. Everyone looked at him. He took off his glasses and rubbed his forehead. No, we don't get to do that. We all sat here ready to tell him what kind of husband he was because of what we were told. He looked at me. I judged you based on what she told us. That's on me. Elaine looked wounded, almost angry at him for breaking formation. Grant turned back to Marissa. But what is this? Marissa didn't answer. She didn't have a version that survived the documents. I gathered the folder slowly. I left copies of the most important pages on the table because I knew by then that whispers would start the second I walked out. Before I left, I looked at Elaine. I didn't bring your family into this, I said. Marissa did. I just stopped letting her bring only half the truth. Siobhan was waiting in my driveway when I got home. I had texted her one word from Elaine's kitchen. Done. She had brought coffee, even though it was too late for coffee, because that was what we did in my family when we didn't know what else to do. We sat on the front steps in the dark. You okay? She asked. No. Good. That would be weird. I laughed once, and it hurt. Then I told her what happened. She listened without interrupting until I got to the block transfer. Siobhan closed her eyes. $18,000. Yeah. A boundary is not punishment, she said. Remember that when she starts calling it cruelty. Marissa came home 2 hours later. I heard her car before I saw the headlights. Siobhan left through the side door because she didn't trust herself not to say something that would make it worse. Marissa walked in with mascara under her eyes and her phone in her hand. He won't answer, she said. I was sitting at the kitchen table. Nolan. She didn't respond, which was its own answer. She called him twice while standing 10 feet from me. Both went to voicemail. Then her phone buzzed. I didn't ask to see it. She read it out loud anyway. Maybe because the humiliation was too heavy to hold alone. He says, I can't be in the middle of this. You need to handle your husband. The kitchen was silent except for the refrigerator humming. I wanted to say something cruel. I wanted to say, that's the man who made you feel chosen? I wanted to hand her every comparison she had thrown at me and make her choke on them. Instead, I said, sounds like he chose distance. She sank into the chair across from me. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. No, you meant for it to work. Her eyes filled again. That's not fair. Marissa, you were going to send him $18,000 from our joint account. He needed help, and I needed a wife who didn't plan to frame me as controlling if I protected our money. She flinched at that. I never said abuse, she whispered. You didn't have to. You gave them the outline and let them color it in. She looked toward the living room, toward the couch where we had watched hundreds of hours of bad TV, toward the blanket she always tucked under one foot. The house looked normal around us, which made everything feel more obscene. What happens now? She asked. I separated my direct deposit. I talked to a lawyer. I'm not paying for anything connected to Nolan, directly or indirectly. The bank has extra verification on the joint account. Her face changed. You talked to a lawyer? Yes. So you were planning this. I was protecting myself from what you planned. She pressed both hands over her face. If counseling happens, I said, you tell your family the truth yourself. Not a version. Not we both made mistakes. The truth. You cut Nolan off completely. You give full access to anything involving our shared money. And you stop calling accountability control. She looked up. So I have to humiliate myself? No, I said. You have to be honest in the same places you lied. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the man speaking to her. Maybe she didn't. For years, I had mistaken patience for strength. That night was the first time my patience had teeth. I'm not competing with Nolan, I said. I'm deciding whether there's still a marriage where only two people are allowed inside it. For the next week, the apologies came in pieces. Uncle Grant called first. I'm sorry, he said. No warm-up, no excuses. I should have asked more questions before judging you. Thank you. I don't know what happens with you two, but what happened at that table wasn't right. That meant more than he probably knew. A cousin texted, I only knew what she said. Still, I'm sorry I added to it. Another sent nothing but, I shouldn't have called you controlling. Elaine took longer. When she finally called, her voice was stiff. I am sorry for assuming, she said. I waited. And she inhaled. And for speaking to you like you were harming my daughter when I didn't have the whole picture. It wasn't warm, but it was something. Marissa did send a message to the family group chat. I watched her type it at the kitchen table, jaw tight, fingers slow. She wrote, I left out important context about Nolan and about money. Fergal did try to book counseling, and I canceled. I also discussed sending money to Nolan from our joint account and said things that made Fergal look controlling when that was not the full truth. I read it and said, that's close. She looked exhausted. What else do you want? The part where you plan to use them if I caught you. Her eyes hardened. You want to punish me. I want the truth to be as public as the lie. She added one more sentence. I also told Nolan that if Fergal found out, I would say he had been controlling me and that my mom would back me. That was wrong. Then she hit send and cried like I had taken something from her. We went to one counseling session. I went because I wanted to be able to say, honestly, that I had not walked away without checking whether there was anything left to save. The counselor asked Marissa what she wanted. Marissa said, I want my marriage back. The counselor asked what she believed she had done to damage it. Marissa looked at me and said, I made bad choices because I felt invisible. I felt the last thread loosen. Bad choices, I said quietly. The counselor looked at me. What did you hear in that? I heard regret, I said. Not accountability. Marissa turned toward me. What do you want me to say? That I'm a monster? No. I want you to stop making your betrayal sound like a symptom of my failure. She cried again. I believed the tears were real. I just didn't believe they were for what she had done to me. They were for the fact that the story no longer protected her. A few days later, I filed for legal separation. I didn't do it with a dramatic speech. I didn't leave in the middle of the night. I told her at the same kitchen table where we had paid bills, eaten takeout, and once spent 3 hours building a vacation budget we never used. The paperwork is filed, I said. She stared at me for a long time. So that's it. For now, yes. You're throwing away 8 years. No, I said. I'm refusing to let 8 years be used as a leash. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Not innocent. Smaller. Do you still love me? She asked. That was the question I had been afraid of, because the answer was not clean. Yes, I said. But love isn't enough when I'm the only one protecting it. She covered her mouth and started crying. I stood up, because if I stayed, I knew I would start comforting her, and some old reflex in me still wanted to make her pain easier even after she had made mine public. At the doorway, she said my name. I turned around. I loved you enough to fight for us, I said. I respect myself enough to stop fighting alone. Then I left. The months after that were not clean or cinematic. Legal separation is paperwork, awkward conversations, divided bills, and waking up in a quiet room with no one to blame for the silence. Some mornings I missed her so much I hated myself for it. Some nights I replayed that dinner and wished I had exposed less. Then I would remember the message. If he finds out, I'll tell them he's been controlling me for months. My mom will back me. That sentence cured me every time I got too nostalgic. Nolan disappeared from her life as quickly as he had re-entered it. From what I heard, he blocked her after a few more unanswered calls and one long message about how he couldn't carry her emotional chaos. He had been happy to be the man who understood her when my money was part of the fantasy. Once the money was blocked and the evidence was public, he suddenly became very committed to boundaries. Marissa eventually admitted more to Elaine, though never as much as she should have. Elaine and I are polite now in the way people are polite after a house fire. Careful, quiet, aware of what burned. Siobhan still checks on me. She never says, "I told you so," which is how I know she loves me. She just drops by sometimes with coffee and says, "Still breathing?" Most days I am. Some people probably think I went too far by bringing that folder to dinner. Maybe they think marriage problems should stay private. I used to believe that too. But privacy stops being noble when only one person is expected to keep it. Marissa had already made our marriage public. She made my character public. She made my supposed control public. She invited people to judge me based on edited scenes and missing pages. All I did was bring the rest of the record into the same room. I didn't expose her because I wanted applause. There was no applause. Just paper napkins, cold chicken, and a family slowly realizing they had been handed a script. I exposed the truth because silence had become a weapon pointed at me. Trust does not mean blindness. Love does not mean self-erasure. And if you turn your family into a courtroom, don't be shocked when evidence walks in. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.